University band director Albert Perfect and student John DeWitt Gilbert, the assistant editor of the Emerald, met to decide if combining Perfect's music with Gilbert's lyrics would make a suitable school fight song. The result was, and still is, Mighty Oregon.
Good. Well, I guess the next step is for you and the band to present it to the student body to see if they'll accept it.
They better. We certainly can't keep using On Wisconsin forever.
Beckett back to do the kicking. Here's the snap back, and the ball goes to Beckett. He gets the kick away down to the Pennsylvania 14-yard line. Howard Berry gathers it in, and Berry begins to run. He puts the ball. He puts it way back to the Webfoot 39 to Cy Huntington, and Huntington cuts up across midfield, down to the 45, down to the 43 before he's run out of bounds.
Two punts on the same play. Well, things have changed since January 1st, 1917, when the Oregon Wetfoots, the Pacific Coast champions of the West, met the Pennsylvania Quakers, champions of the East. In the third Rose Bowl ever played, underdog Oregon upset Penn 14-0. It is interesting for me, having been a history major and football player at Oregon, to notice how the program has changed over the years.
The Ducks began playing in 1894, 22 years before band director Albert Perfect and assistant editor of the Emerald, John DeWitt Gilbert, collaborated on Mighty Oregon. In 1904, they moved to Kincaid Field, located near Chapman Hall. In 1919, Hayward Field was built, named after Bill Hayward, the track coach and head trainer from 1903 to 1947. And in 1967, Autzen Stadium replaced Hayward Field as the football home of the Ducks. The team's original name was the Webfoots. Sports writers began calling them the Ducks to save copy space, and Ducks became the common usage, especially after 1947, when Walt Disney granted the university rights to use the Donald Duck logo. Of course, it's not names and places, but seeing those great games, plays, and players that make Oregon football exciting.
He was probably one of the toughest players I've ever played with. He took tremendous beating week after week.
This certainly had to be the most exciting football game I've ever seen or ever have been around.
In my mind, clearly, he is the one above all others.
We'll find out who and what they were talking about, but first, let's look at how he went to the Rose Bowl twice by 1920.
Cal Young was Oregon's first coach, and in their first game, the Ducks trounced Albany College 44-2. College football began in 1869 with Rutgers playing Princeton, 7 years before the University of Oregon was even founded. The Oregon State rivalry also began in 1894 as the Webfoots played what was then Oregon Agricultural College. In 1895, the Webfoots went 4-0, including a win over Portland in what was called the best exhibition of sport ever seen in Portland. Interest in football grew, and California, Stanford, Washington, and Washington State were added to the schedule. The 1899 team was the first to travel out of state, playing Cal in Berkeley. The 1900 team beat Washington 43-0 in their first meeting and also beat Cal. It was strictly a running game through 1905, but American football had become so violent that in that year alone, 67 young men died from football injuries. President Teddy Roosevelt demanded that the game be cleaned up. As a result, the NC2A, most modern rules, and the forward pass came into being. The 1906 Ducks went undefeated again, this time under a young coach named Hugo Bezdek. Bezdek, from the rough south side of Chicago, learned his football from Amos Alonzo Stagg. In 1907, Bezdek moved to Arkansas, where, with the help of Stagg, he pioneered the use of the passing formations. Coaches at Oregon were then much like graduate assistants. In fact, through 1912, the Ducks had 16 coaches, resulting in a 64-34 one-loss record. In 1910, the rule specified that the passer had to be 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage to throw a pass, and it stayed that way until 1945. The ball was a little larger in the middle, as you can see from this 1910 game ball. Chuck Taylor scored 10 touchdowns against Puget Sound in a 114-0 slaughter. Taylor was the first player west of the Mississippi to get All-American mention by Walter Camp. 1913 marked the return of Hugo Bezdek for a 5-year stay. Of all the Oregon coaches that were here 5 years or more, Bezdek is the only one that never had a losing season. Bezdek's quarterback from 1914 to 1916 was Charles Shy Huntington. Possessing a stocky frame and a cool head, the Dalles Oregon product was Oregon's first-team All-American. Bezdek rarely praised a player. He was fond of shouting, "Your best is not good enough. I want something better." He was known to put onions on his cheeks to bring tears before pregame pep talks and loved to be the underdog, describing his opponents as villains and cheats. After losing its first 2 games, Shy led the 1915 team to 7 straight wins. Included in the 7 wins was a 34-0 whitewashing of USC in their first meeting. That set the stage for the 1916 season, the first year of the Pacific Coast Conference, which included the Ducks, Cal, Washington, and Oregon State. The 1916 Ducks went undefeated against all the PCC teams. Their only blemish a tie to Gil Doby's Huskies, who had not lost a game in 9 years. The 7-0-1 champions were said to have a large line, averaging 185 pounds. The Ducks earned a trip to the 1917 Rose Bowl but had to face the Pennsylvania Quakers, who posted 3 All-Americans: Heine Miller, Walter Berry, and Bert Gold Bell, who drove around Philadelphia in a Cadillac and later became commissioner of the NFL. Oregon team captain John Beckett said, "We were scared to death of them, but the Ducks played a great game, being in better condition and hitting the Quakers harder." Penn's coach was stunned by the 14-0 outcome, but praised the Ducks to the press, saying Oregon had a great team and deserved to win. One of the key plays was a double reverse pass for a touchdown from Johnny Parsons to Shy Huntington to Lloyd Taggart. Coach Bezdek had held closed practices the whole time in California before the game, but he wasn't above accepting an invitation by Penn coach Bob Falwell to watch the Quakers practice. Bezdek asked Falwell to show him their reverse pass play. Falwell told Bert Bell to do it. Bell reluctantly ran it. The Quakers were more than bent out of shape when Oregon scored its first touchdown of the Rose Bowl using their play. The game was truly an upset. These 2 Hollywood actresses were so certain Penn would win, they told their producer they'd ride around Hollywood in their pajamas if Oregon won. Here they are after their risque ride. Bezdek left Oregon in 1918 due to World War I, and then went on to coach Penn State. In 1922, he earned the amazing sum of $18,000. After 24 years of coaching, he was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. In 1918, Shy Huntington took over as coach. Stanford was added to the PCC, and by 1919, the Ducks were on the road back to Pasadena. Quarterback Bill Steers led the Ducks from 1917 to 1920 and was all-coast 3 years. In the 1920 Rose Bowl, Oregon faced Harvard. Oregon almost doubled Harvard in yardage and first downs, but lost a heartbreaker 7-6 as they missed 2 easy field goals near the end of the game. Despite the loss, the Ducks were honored in Eugene afterwards as having outplayed Harvard in the greatest football game ever. Trainer Bill Hayward stole the show before the game, though. Hayward told the LA Press that he wouldn't allow his players to drink Southern California water, and he would bring Oregon water with him on the train. The LA Press made such a big deal about it that local residents would come to the hotel where the Ducks were staying and ask for Oregon water. Of course, Hayward hadn't brought any, but served them bottles of their own water without them knowing it. Hayward Field, built in 1919, was not only named after a great athletic trainer and track coach, but a real character. Trivia question number 1. Oregon has had 2 players named as the most valuable player of the Rose Bowl. Who were they? And what distinction did they have in common? In the Roaring 20s, 1 year before the stock market crash, the university had grown from 1,800 students in 1920 to 3,300 in 1929. MacArthur Court, Burlingame, and Allen Halls, and the music and education buildings joined the existing 8 buildings. In 1928, some university students made a 75-minute dramatic film entitled Ed's Co-Ed. Here's Ed arriving at campus and being misdirected by some upperclassmen to leave Johnson Hall and to register at a sorority house.
In the wake of 2 Rose Bowl appearances in the late teens, the Ducks of the early 20s stayed strong. In the middle they declined, but their stock rose dramatically at the end.
In 1920, for the first time, a crowd of over 10,000 saw Oregon play OAC. Shy Huntington continued his winning ways through 1922, the year USC and Montana joined the PCC. The 1922 team went 6-1-1, with its only loss to Multnomah. In 1923, Huntington had his only losing season at 3-4-1 and reluctantly stepped down as coach due to lack of alumni support.
Shy Huntington was a very intelligent, basically was sound in football and its rules and regulations and training. He was tops. He was well liked by all his players, and they really thought the world of him.
Hal Chapman was an all-coast quarterback in 1923. In 1924, the Ducks improved to 4-2-3 under a former Michigan All-American named Joe Maddock. Gordon Wilson, a center on the team, remembers the big 7-3 win over Washington.
When we had the great George Wilson and Elmer Tesoro, those All-Americans playing on the Washington club, and won 7-3 without a substitution. I weighed in before the game and weighed out after the game, and I lost exactly 17 pounds that afternoon. And it wasn't a hot afternoon. It was very wet, and the sawdust was very deep.
In 1926, Captain John McEwen from New York, seen here with Newt Rockne, took over. In that same year, the rules changed so that a 5-yard penalty was assessed on any incomplete pass after first down. That rule lasted until 1934. In 1928, UCLA joined the PCC, and Oregon went 9-2, including a 26-6 thrashing of UCLA in its very first meeting. From 1928 to 1930, Oregon was paced by all-coast quarterback Johnny Kitzmiller, the Flying Dutchman. The 165-pound back was very versatile, running, passing, pass receiving, kicking, and punting. Bill Bowerman, who played end and slot back in 1930 to 1932, remembers Kitzmiller.
Kitzmiller was a senior when I was a sophomore, and he was a great running back and a great field general. He was a coach of the backfield my senior year, so I had an opportunity to play with him and to play under him as a backfield coach.
The 1929 team, led by all-coast tackle Austin Colbert, shut out 6 teams en route to a 7-3 record. In 1931, the Old Oregon magazine consulted ex-players and coaches and came up with their all-star, all-time Oregon team through 1930. Here's the 11-man first team. At center, George Hugh, described as a swashbuckling type of old-style player. Fred Molen was at one guard and for a while held the world record for the longest field goal at 53 yards. At the other guard was Floyd Shields, one of 4 outstanding Shields linemen to play at Oregon in the 20s. John Beckett, at 6'1" and 185 pounds, was probably the toughest lineman up to that time that Oregon ever had. He was elected into the National Football Foundation Hall of Fame. Louis Pinkham was described by Pat MacArthur, the father of Oregon athletics, as the best tackle ever seen on a Northwest team. At ends were Brick Mitchell and Lloyd Teggart, 1917 Rose Bowl teammates. Mitchell was hailed as one of the best tacklers in the nation after the Rose Bowl game, and Teggart caught a touchdown pass in that game. Kitzmiller was the quarterback. Johnny Parsons was one halfback, and Bill Steers the other. L.H. Gregory, former sports editor of the Portland Oregonian, when he first saw O.J. Simpson run, said O.J.'s running style reminded him of Parsons. Steers averaged 50 yards a punt in some games and once kicked the ball from his own end zone to the other end zone. The fullback was Dick Smith, who after 4 years at Oregon went to play at Columbia and from there was selected as an All-American. Who were Oregon's 2 Rose Bowl MVPs? Hollis Huntington, a brother to Shai, was MVP in 1920, and Jack Crabtree was MVP in the 1958 Rose Bowl. They share the distinction that the teams they played on lost their Rose Bowl games. There have been many brothers and father-son combinations who have played at Oregon. Only one family, though, has had 3 generations earn letters for the Ducks. Despite the Depression, the university kept on functioning with enrollment at first going down to 2,300, then coming back up to 4,000 by 1939. The Art Museum, Esslinger, Chapman, and the library were built.
While the nation experienced the worst of times, the Ducks won more games in the 30s than in any decade prior or since.
The 30s began with a new coach, Clarence Doc Spears, who left a 28-3-9 program at Minnesota for the Ducks. Spears didn't disappoint as the Kitzmiller-led Ducks went 6-2, including an impressive victory over powerhouse Drake at Soldiers Field in Chicago. The largest crowd ever to see a game in the Northwest saw the Ducks upset Washington 7-0 in Seattle. It was the 3rd of 6 straight shutouts over the Huskies. In 1931, Joe Lillard, Oregon's 3rd black player and the 2nd black player ever to play pro football, led Oregon's Midnight Express backfield. Another star of the 1931 team was George Christensen, a tackle who became Oregon's 2nd first-team All-American. Spears left after 1931, and Prince G. Callison, who had been freshman coach, took over then.
Spears was going to show someone how to block men. I brought my forearm up in his face, and he screamed like a wounded bull and chased me around the field. I adored Prince Callison. I liked the assistant coaches that they had, but my personality didn't match up with Spears at any time.
In Prink's 6 years, the Ducks won 6 or more games 4 times, and Oregon produced 2 more All-Americans.
Prink was really a fine man, a great tactician, really he was. He was a great tactician. He had a fine line coach by the name of Gene Shields, who was with us for a number of years, and Prink was an innovator.
Our coach, Prink Callison, developed an end-around play, and I made a lot of yardage on that season and scored 3 touchdowns against our opponents.
Here are the 1932 Ducks in action against SC. The Ducks are in the light-colored uniform.
Iron Mike Michalak up the middle to the 10, to the 15, to the 20. Pretty good hold at the 25. Breaks a tackle at the 30. Cuts outside at the 35 to the 40. One man to beat. He's run out of bounds at the 47. Homer Griffith gets the snap. Rolling to his right. Good pressure by the Webfoots. Under the heavy rush, he throws deep. Bill Bowerman on the coverage, but the pass is caught at the 8-yard line.
LSU coach Bill Jones called the 200-pound Michalak the roughest, toughest, and best all-around fullback he'd ever seen.
A great offensive fullback with what was called the cruncher play. That was tabbed by old L.H. Gregory, the former sports editor of the Portland Oregonian.
What was the cruncher play?
Well, it was the ability for Michalak to make his own interference if it wasn't there. It was the position that he ran, tremendously powerful thighs that were like pistons going at an angle where he was never off balance.
The highlight of the 1932 season was when 1,000 Duck fans traveled by train to Baton Rouge for a December 17th postseason meeting with LSU. The field was frozen, and the bands could not even play, but Michalak scored twice as Oregon upset the Tigers 12-0. The 1933 team went 9-1 and shared the PCC championship with USC, who had beaten the Ducks. The Ducks beat St. Mary's, the Notre Dame of the West, for the first time. Razzle-dazzle passing plays were the exception, not the norm through the mid-30s.
In college football, we didn't throw more than 4 or 5 passes. In pro ball, it was 6 or 7. It wasn't until my 3rd year when a Sammy Baugh came out of Texas, played for the Washington Redskins, and he threw in one game the unheard of 32 passes or thereabouts. We thought that was tremendous.
Other stars of the early 30s were Bill Morgan, who played against the Huskies with both arms in casts, and center Bernie Hughes.
190-pound center who was an all-coast, second-team All-Pro, and many people have forgotten about Bernie Hughes, one of the strongest individuals I ever saw.
In the mid-30s, the Oregon-Washington rivalry really heated up.
My greatest game, I think, victory, was against Washington in 1935. We went up there, and they were a three-touchdown favorite, and we managed to beat them 7-6, and of course, that was kind of unheard of.
6 foot 1 inch, 200-pound, all-coast tackle Del Bjork remembers playing Washington in 1936.
I was able to drive their plays back better than usual, and I did block 1 punt. And I think that was the only punt in 3 years that the Washington kicker had blocked.
In 1937, Coach Callison's last season, the Ducks beat Stanford for the first time and scored 2 long touchdowns versus USC.
Steve Anderson, back to pass, steps up, throws into the right flat. The defender falls down. Ted Gebhardt wide open at the 30, up the right sideline to the 45, to midfield, 1 man to beat. Needs a block and gets a great block at the 30, down the right sideline, 25-20. He'll go all the way, 72-yard touchdown. The snap to Jay Graybeal, hands it off to Bob Smith. The southpaw rolling to his left, looks back to his right, has a man open, and it's Graybeal. He's open at the 5-yard line, makes the catch, touchdown.
Tex Oliver, whose Arizona team handed Callison his last loss at Oregon, took over in 1938. Speedy Jay Graybeal from Pendleton was an all-around performer for the Ducks from 1937 to 1939. Here, Graybeal intercepts a pass against Cal. Big Jim Stewart was an all-coast lineman and opened holes for Bob Smith and punishing 220-pound fullback Frank Emmons. The 1939 team tied USC, beat Stanford, and edged Cal 6-0. After the Cal game, the Ducks were ranked number 6 nationally. But Gonzaga's upset win and a loss to UCLA, sparked by Jackie Robinson, ruined the Ducks' promising season. The 1939 Ducks also faltered at the end of the season against the Beavers. Here, Bob Olson runs a kickoff back 92 yards. One of Oregon's scores came on this pass from Graybeal to Dick Horn. In Oliver's 6 years, the Ducks had 3 500 seasons, but no winning records. In the 30s, there was one record-breaking play. In 1938, against Idaho, halfback Bob Smith took a handoff on the 8-yard line and ran 92 yards. In 1939, Smith was the first winner of the Hoffman Award, given each year for the outstanding play by team vote. There's no getting around the fact that football is a violent game, and the players and the fans enjoy that aspect.
I enjoyed hitting people.
We just played rough, tough football.
This is DJ, bringing you Oregon's greatest hits of all times.
What family had 3 generations of Duck lettermen? It was the Reed family. Dick Reed was the team captain in 1924 and the first president of the Oregon Club. His son John was an end in 1951 and 1953. Linebacker John Jr. lettered in 1973, 1975, and 1976. This Oregon player was an outstanding two-sport athlete in the 40s, and his son went on to become an All-American at Oregon in a different sport than what his father had excelled in. In the midst of a world preparing for and going to war, there was still time for parades, celebrations, fun, games, and good times. In 1949, Carson Hall and the EMU were built to meet student needs.
In 1943 and 1944, football was suspended because of World War II. For most of the 40s, the Ducks played 500 ball. But in 1947, a new coach gathered together a group of post-war young men that would develop into what many considered to be Oregon's greatest football team.
UCLA at its 43-yard line. The snap to Jackie Robinson. Jackie to pass. Now he scrambles out of the pocket to the left. Needs a block. He's at the 45-yard line. Run out of bounds at the 48.
Although future Major League Baseball Hall of Famer Jackie Robinson was impressive, the Ducks shut out UCLA 18-0. 1941 saw the institution of platoon football, which lasted until 1953. Kurt Meacham was the Hoffman Award winner in 1941, and halfback Tom Roblin was All-Coast in 1942.
From the Husky 36-yard line, Tom Roblin right into the right, cuts off tackle, trying to break tackles, and does at the 30, gets outside of the 25 to the 20, has a chance to go all the way, a diving attempt misses, touchdown Roblin! From the Washington 25, Roblin fades to pass, looking down the right sideline, steps up, throws for Meacham. It should be intercepted. It's tipped, but Meacham makes the catch at the 10, to the 5, touchdown Redfoots.
In addition to Washington, the 1941 Ducks beat USC, and in 1942, under temporary coach John Warren, beat Rose Bowl favorite UCLA. The T formation came into being in 1945 as the rules changed to allow passing anywhere behind the line of scrimmage. After World War II, Tex Oliver returned to coach the 1945 Ducks, whose star was a 159-pound running back with 9.6 speed. As a sophomore, Jake Light became Oregon's 5th All-American.
Well, it was kind of a surprise to me because the team we had in 45 we didn't have the talent in the line at all.
Light's choice was no surprise to opponents as he intercepted 10 passes and returned them for 202 yards, still a school record today. Despite platoon football, Light played both offense and defense and led the Ducks in passing, rushing, and scoring. Oliver's lack of success required a change, though.
He knew his football, but he tried to run the whole show, and he couldn't do it. He had one assistant, and he was working the line and the defense and everything like that, and Oliver was running the offense. And
the depressed Ducks recruited an experienced coach with an outstanding track record. In the early 1930s, Jim Aiken's Canton McKinley High School team in Ohio played before crowds of over 30,000. Aiken's teams beat Paul Brown's teams 3 out of 4 times. Brown went on to Ohio State and the Cleveland Browns, while Aiken won college championships at Akron and Nevada. In 1947, Aiken came to Eugene and brought with him a new system, and he chose a third-string quarterback to run it for him.
Well, actually, Norm Van Brocklin came to Oregon as a third-string quarterback with Bob Owis and George Bell out of Walnut Creek, California. And he played third string on a single-wing formation under Tex Oliver. And when Jim Aiken came and put in the T formation, Norm Van Brocklin had such talent that he was immediately the starting quarterback. He was a lousy tailback. He wasn't a tough guy. I could run backwards faster than he could run forward. But Norm Van Brocklin had a tenacity about him that he's a leader. He was a leader.
The 1947 Ducks, with Van Brocklin at the helm, finished 7-3, second in the conference to USC. Light was the team's top ground gainer and most valuable player. He was first-team All-Coast along with center Brad Eklund and Van Brocklin.
We got the most penalties that year with Van. He's always after the officials and telling them, or if somebody tackled him a little bit hard. In one game, he only got tackled one time, and he was mad at us. And they challenged these guys on the field and everything else, and we get penalized all the time.
Van Brocklin gave me the business as he balled me out because we blew a play together. He called the play, and I went one way, and he left holding the ball, and they jumped on him, the other team, and they kind of squashed him. He got mad and called me a lot of names and everything like that, and that was before halftime. And when we went in the dressing room, Jim Akins, boy, he ate him out. He told him that he was the boss, he ran the show, and if he had anything to say to the players, he had to come through him. And after that time, Van never did raise hell with me anymore after that. I probably didn't make any mistakes either.
Lewis, a highly touted running back from Los Angeles City College, came to Oregon to fill Light's shoes.
And they told me that there was a left halfback spot that was open at Oregon, and if I would come to Oregon, that was my job. But when I get up there, they got 14 others trying out for that one spot.
Lewis ended up sharing left halfback with another of Aiken's prized recruits, Johnny McKay, a transfer from Purdue.
Well, I thought Jim was one of the best teachers of football that I've ever been around in my varied career, and I think the biggest thing about Jim is he's the only guy I've ever seen have a car that with shifting gears that he just refused to shift them. He just stayed in one gear no matter what he was doing.
In 1948, Aiken had the Ducks in one gear, and that was Rose Bowl. Unlike many coaches, Aiken encouraged his team and the fans to catch Rose Bowl fever. Preparing for the 1948 season, Aiken's talent-laden team had just one missing position to fill.
I was playing intramural football, and Coach Jim Aiken grabbed me by the collar and said, "You're going to catch Norm Van Bronckhorst's passes next year and be our right end." And I said, "No, I'm not. I drink beer in the spring, and I'm not going to practice football." Nevertheless, I did.
Cal and Oregon were the preseason favorites, and the national media considered Van Brocklin to be the nation's best quarterback. True to form, Van Brocklin said he didn't care if he didn't make all backyard, as long as we win those ball games. And win they did, as the Webfoots went 7-0 in the conference and lost only one game all season.
I played 60 minutes against Michigan. That was a highlight of our team effort, because the game should have really been 14-14. We had one touchdown call back and another end drop to pass in the end zone. But statistically, we were even with them, and as you recall, they were the national champions that year.
Oregon's record was 7-0, and Cal's was 6-0. The problem was that they never played each other. So Oregon challenged Cal to a playoff game and offered to meet them for the showdown in Berkeley. Conference okayed it, but Cal wouldn't do it. So the conference put it to a vote to decide the Rose Bowl team, and Cal got more votes.
Of course, we thought we deserved to go, playing a very, very close game with the national champions and winning all other games. But it came to a vote, and we were told that the University of Washington had voted against us. I know there were hard feelings for a long time after that.
I was very disappointed that we didn't go to the Rose Bowl, but I was just delighted that the conference saw fit to overcome some of the rules that they had stipulated and allowed us to go to the Southwest Conference to play SMU in the Cotton Bowl.
70,000 fans gathered in Dallas, Texas, New Year's Day in 1949 to see Oregon tangle with SMU. The Mustangs were led in the first quarter by the running of future New York Giant great Kyle Rote and All-American quarterback Doak Walker. Walker scored the first touchdown of the game and also got off this 79-yard punt from the line of scrimmage. Oregon's Norm Van Brocklin fires a strike to big Johnny McKay, good for 32 Webfoot yards to the Oregon 45. Late in the first half, Dwayne Johnson's interception stopped another SMU drive. Bob Sanders ripped off some big yardage up the middle as the half ended with SMU leading 7-0. The Mustangs made it 14-0 in the third quarter as Kyle Rote ran for 36 yards. But the Oregon Webfoots came back in the fourth quarter. Fourth quarter now, Norm Van Brocklin heaves to the end zone, blocked by Dick Wilson.
for an Oregon touchdown. The conversion is no good, and SMU's lead is now 14-6. The bomber back to fire, sees his man, throws a looping pass, complete to Darrell Robinson on the Mustang 20.
Behind 21-6, George Bell just missed the Mustang goal line.
Oregon onto the line of scrimmage again. Ben Brocklin back, hands off to Bob Sanders. He is in there for the touchdown. That's the way it ends.
Paul Brown sent 5 of his players out to help teach us his system, and we played the Cleveland Brown system. I think that was very important to us. I really do. It's sort of like taking a college team to spring training in the pros.
Off that first string that we had, practically everybody at one time or another was offered a pro contract.
Brad Eklund won All-Coast honors for the second time and was named the team's most valuable player. Van Brocklin became Oregon's 6th All-American.
They didn't call him the Dutchman for nothing, and he was a hard-nosed player and a fellow you always wanted to be on your side, and he was your quarterback when the chips were down.
SMU game with about a minute to play. I ran a pattern and unfortunately got knee in the groin and came back to the huddle, and Van Brocklin called a long pattern for me, and I said, Norm, I can't make it. And he said, okay, damn it, I'll run the pattern, you throw the bleep football to me. And that's an example of the guy.
The 1949 team still had a lot of talent, but finished 4-6. Bob Sanders was the leading rusher, and George Bell continued to run hard. Woodley Lewis was the Hoffman Award winner. Guard and place kicker Chad Daniels was All-Coast along with N. Darrell Robinson. 2 Oregon records were also set in 1949.
It's really a great run because it's 92 yards. The field was wet, and they took a couple of passes, asked me 2 or 3 ways, and I dodged to the right and flipped to the left. And next thing you know, it was a foot race. And that's the reason why you need a little speed when you're playing this game. It really helps. But running back punts and kickoffs is one of the big things that you have to do is to take a burst of speed, get to a point as quick as you can, and then look for an opening. Because if the guys are blocking, usually all you need is 1 or 2 blocks.
Colorado kicking off. Woodley Lewis standing back in his own end zone. A high end-over-end kick. Woodley about 2 yards deep, bobbles the ball, gathers it in, and now heads straight up the middle to the 10, to the 15, to the 20. Good hole for Lewis. Cuts outside. He has a chance to go all the way. In fact, no one's going to catch him. Woodley Lewis, 45-40. He's going to go 102 yards, a record-setting touchdown on the kickoff return for Woodley Lewis.
Trivia answer number 3. The 2-sport athlete was Dick Wilkins, who also starred in basketball. His son Mac was an All-American discus thrower at Oregon in the early 1970s. These former Oregon greats have the same last name and were both All-Coast ends. One was one of the tallest ends to play at Oregon, and the other was one of the smallest. In the baby boom era, the Science Building, Walton Complex, and Layton Pool were completed. Oregon welcomed a new president, Meredith Wilson, and the recently built Erb Memorial Union became the hub for student interaction.
In the period of time that saw Korea, television, Sputnik, the birth of rock and roll, the Ducks got off to a rocky start. But by the end of the decade, they were on a roll.
In 2 short years, the Ducks went from their best record at 9-1 to their worst ever at 1-9. One bright spot on the 1950 team was All-Coast quarterback Earl Stell. Aiken left in 1951 amid rumors of overzealous recruiting practices. He was replaced by a coach who, in 1950, led Santa Clara to an upset victory over Kentucky in the Orange Bowl. The losing coach was Paul Bear Bryant. The winner was Len Casanova. Despite the poor 1950 season, the Ducks still landed All-State quarterback George Shaw from Grant High in Portland. As a freshman, Shaw, playing safety and part-time quarterback, set an NCAA record for 13 interceptions. It's still an Oregon record. Shaw made a brilliant one-handed interception against Washington, but the game was one of assistant coach John McKay's worst football memories.
And we scored to go ahead 6-0, and Washington promptly came back and beat us 63-6. And I'll never forget that game to the day I die, because Kaz was such a great guy, and they had promised my wife a birthday party, and we went down to a nightclub there, and we had a real good time, despite the score. But that game has stuck with me, and every time I have played Washington since, it stuck with me.
In 1951, Oregon almost upset a strong Cal team, coached by Pappy Waldorf.
Well, they went to the Rose Bowl that year, and we put in this defense, and it was the screwiest defense you could ever think of. And so we thought we'd use it for a while anyway, so we used it, and in the first half, didn't use it all the time, but we mixed it in there and used it most of the time. And this game was pretty close. I think it was 14-14 at halftime. So we decided at halftime, well, they would analyze that defense in a hurry, and so we wouldn't be using it. But I said, well, let's try it the first couple of plays anyway. Well, the first play they ran for 15 yards, and again, second play they ran for another about 10 or 12 yards. And so I said, all right, let's get out of that defense. After the ball game, Pappy Waldorf came up to me and he said, why did you ever get out of that defense? I said, well, my gosh, you guys had that analyzed. He says, we didn't know what you were doing in there, so sometimes you outsmart yourself and the thing like. He says, we didn't figure that defense out at all. We won't be able to until we see the movies on the thing.
Here's Kaz's 1952 coaching staff, made up of Vern Sterling, Jack Roach, who came with him from Santa Clara, and John McKay.
From the Bruin 38-yard line, a slot to the right. Shaw in motion from right to left. Hal Dunham back to throw. Has plenty of time. Rifles one down the left sideline. Shaw open. Touchdown.
In 1952, Emory Barnes was selected All-Coast. A key factor in the choice being the rave reviews UCLA coach Red Sanders and the LA Press gave him in Oregon's 13-6 loss.
Score tied 14-14. Brett Hauer approaches the ball. It is an onside kick. The ball is loose and the Ducks recover. From the Idaho 40-yard line, Dunham with a full house backfield, turns, gives the ball to Dean Van Leuven. Big hole up the middle. Van Leuven to the left. Now he cuts back up the middle. He has a chance to go all the way. Van Leuven will score, and the Ducks take the lead.
The exciting come-from-behind win against Idaho was one of only 2 wins in 1952. Monty Bretthauer ended his 3-year career with a school record 107 receptions. Oregon opened the 1953 season against Nebraska in the first college football game ever televised.
From his own 43, Barney Holland turns, gives it to Dick James off right tackle. James to midfield to the Cornhusker 45 to the 40. James will go all the way on national television, 57 yards.
Oregon upset Nebraska 20-12, but the biggest upset was yet to come. USC came into Portland in 1953 undefeated and ranked number 7 in the nation.
So we devised this defense on the bus as we were on the way up there. Put it on the blackboard just before the ball game, and we went out there and used it. And I think it was something of a surprise to USC, and we beat them. I think that way we hadn't had that defense, we wouldn't have beaten them.
In the first half, Barney Holland drops back to pass, completes the pass to Shaw into the end zone for an Oregon touchdown.
I got an awful lot of credit for that because I went down and cut to the sidelines into the end zone, but that's not an easy pass to throw, and Barney had the ball right on the money, and all I had to do was catch it and step into the end zone, and we won the game.
Oregon made a gutty goal line stand to preserve the win, and Cass got a ride. Oregon finished 1953 4-5-1, but played every team close and were exciting to watch.
He threw the ball into the end zone, and they called me for pass interference. I wasn't used to catching the ball, and I guess you're not supposed to push the other guy in the back, but I did. So Barney said, well, let's try that again, and we came up with the same play again. That time we caught it and scored a touchdown. That was fun.
Dick James led the team in rushing and scoring, and Shaw was named All-Coast for the 2nd time. Center Ron Feaster was also named All-Coast. Big things were expected of the Ducks in 1954, but they got derailed early when Stanford, led by sophomore quarterback John Brody, upset Oregon 18-13. The Ducks still had ball hopes as they met USC before a national television audience. Oregon tied it at halftime when Shaw hit James. But SC's John Arnett scored twice in the second half to seal a Trojan victory. The season ended with a satisfying 33-14 romp, though, over the Beavers. The Oregon State game was very memorable for James.
I had scored 3 touchdowns in the game, and that tied me for the lead in the scoring for the conference that year. And I had a habit of taking a long time in the showers afterwards, just to kind of soak out some of the soreness that I would anticipate having the next day. When I came out of the locker room, here I thought I'd just done a super job out there, and the bus is gone. I am left in Corvallis, in the enemy territory, first of all, and all of a sudden this girl came driving up in a car. Well, I happened to know her. It was Sonia Taylor, a friend, the coach's daughter, and she offered me a ride back to Eugene. And so we're driving back to Eugene and had the radio on, and we heard the announcement that her father had just been fired as head coach of Oregon State. So I thought it was a little bit funny.
Jasper McGee led the Webfoots in rushing as the Ducks finished third behind USC and UCLA. Guard Jack Patera, seen here causing a fumble against Washington and later to coach the Seattle Seahawks, was named All-Coast. Shaw, who led the nation in total offense, won the Hoffman Award and became Oregon's 7th All-American. He also won the Pop Warner Trophy, given to the West Coast Outstanding Football Player. He is the only Oregon player ever selected. Shaw was the #1 college player chosen in the 1955 professional football draft. He was selected by the Baltimore Colts.
Jack Patera was drafted by Baltimore. We were teammates at Oregon. And I'll never forget getting a call from Don Kellett stating that they had drafted us. And we got in Jack's old car and drove downtown Eugene to a smoke shop and got a sports magazine, because I didn't even know who the coach for the Baltimore Colts was. I didn't know any of the players, what color their jerseys were. And the only teams that we were ever exposed to were the Los Angeles Rams, where Norm Van Brocklin played, and the San Francisco 49ers when Frankie Albert and Wyatt Tittle and those people played there.
The 1955 Ducks went 6-4 again, led by the trio of James and sophomore running backs Jim Shanley and Jack Morris. Shanley finished 10th in the nation in rushing. Face masks were still not in vogue, as sophomore Harry Mondale found out the hard way.
There was one game that I remember we went over to play the University of Arizona at Tucson, and on the first play of the game, we kicked off them, and I was running down the field, and before I knew it, I had 3 of my front teeth laying in my hand, and I looked down at my teeth and looked down at my hand and saw my teeth there. I spit them out into my hand, and I looked around and saw everybody running down the field along with me. I said, so I just threw them down. I said, I better get going. I threw them down and went on down the field, and I just kept bleeding and playing for the remainder of the game. Cass said, Johnny McKay says, you better get Harry out of there. He looks like he's hurt. And old McKay says, nah, let him play, Cass. He's tough. And so I went on, and I was just a mass of blood by the time the game was over. And to this day, I've never found my teeth.
The Ducks ended the season with their 2nd straight win over Oregon State in the mud at Hayward Field. It was the only time Kaz's teams ever won 2 straight against the Beavers. But the win meant a lot to him for another reason.
We had just come back from Stanford, of taking quite a beating. In fact, came back on the campus and I was hung in effigy. And then I was crowned the same day, but so it kind of took a little of the sting out of that. But we were playing Oregon State, and Oregon State had an exceptionally fine year, and they were supposed to be so much better than we were. And we beat them 28-0, and I think they made 3 first downs. And though in the minds of a lot of people it wasn't a bowl game or anything else like that, but after taking such a beating from the week prior to that game and then coming back and I'm beating a very, very fine team so decisively, why, to me, it's one of the most satisfying games I've ever coached.
In 1955, Dick James was the Hoffman Award winner. In 1956, the Ducks began the season beating Orange Bowl-bound Colorado 35-0 and also whipped USC. Another highlight of the season was Thanksgiving Day, when Oregon met Oregon State on national TV and played to a 14-14 tie. And Phil McHugh was selected All-Coast on the 4-4-2 team. McHugh later was an assistant coach for the Ducks for over 10 years. In 1957, the Ducks were picked to finish near the bottom of the conference. They started the season with Crabtree again at quarterback, but this time it was Jack Crabtree. Tom Crabtree had been the quarterback in 1955 and 56. They were the only Crabtrees ever to play at Oregon. They both were quarterbacks, however, they were not related. The season didn't get off to a good start for Crabtree.
We win the first one, I believe, 9-6 in Idaho, and kind of struggled to win that one. The second we came back and had the game won, 3-0 going in the last 20 seconds, and a long touchdown pass over somebody's head. We lost the ball game 6-3 in the last few moments.
Who would have guessed that the GOAT of the 6-3 loss to Pittsburgh would in 90 days be the most valuable player of the Rose Bowl?
Well, the next game or two we play Stanford, which I still feel in my mind was the best game that we played. We win the game 27-26, up and down the field. We'd score, they'd score, and back and forth. We ran plays without a huddle. I called audibles at the line of scrimmage almost the entire ball game.
The Ducks clinched a trip to the Rose Bowl against USC as Jack Morris ran wild, amassing 212 yards. The 1957 Ducks were the only Oregon team to sweep the 4 California schools. They shut out Red Sanders' strong UCLA team 21-0. All the wins in the 1957 season were big ones, but one play against Washington State almost kept the Ducks out.
The Cougars lined up for the extra point to try to tie the game. The snap is down. The kick is no good. And there's a dog on the field that must have rattled the Cougar. It looks like Oregon will hang on 14-13.
Jim Shanley, scoring here against Washington State on a pass from Leroy Phelps, was named All-Coast along with Harry Mondale.
The Rose Bowl team was a team that accomplished more for the ability they had, because you actually analyze that team, and there weren't too many great players on that team. In fact, there were very few, but they were a determined group, fearless group. In fact, the second team, they were termed the Ugly Ducklings because, I mean, they were a straggly-looking bunch, and but they played with all the enthusiasm and lack of fear, or nobody was going to be better than they are, and they put out everything you could possibly put out, and didn't have all that ability.
The Ducks' opponent in the 1958 Rose Bowl was national champion Ohio State, coached by Woody Hayes. The LA Press called the game one of the biggest mismatches in Rose Bowl history and said Oregon didn't deserve to be on the same field with the Buckeyes.
That made everybody a little angry, probably. Again, like I mentioned before, it was a very competitive group of people. And I don't think anybody wanted to hear that somebody was going to beat us by 6 touchdowns. Probably the papers intimidated us more than anything, but they also did us a favor in a lot of ways. In our determination was to make them look bad.
Although the Ducks were on a mission to prove the experts were wrong, they were loose before the game after having arrived at the stadium about 2 hours too early.
And actually, I didn't know what the dickens to do with the guys, and so I told each one of the assistants, I said, all right, you take your group of kids over here and get them relaxed. Do something about relaxing them. Tell them war stories or any other thing you want to tell them about them, but trying to get them relaxed in there. And first thing you know, you'd see that group laughing a little bit over there, and the next group would be laughing a little bit over here. And so when we went into the dressing room, I think practically all I said is, I said, fellas, all I want you to do out there, I want to be proud of you at the end of the ball game.
Jack Morris approaching the ball, and the 1958 Rose Bowl is underway. Ballinger back at his 2, up the middle to the 10, to the 15, and Peterson brings him down.
The Buckeyes surprised no one by taking that kickoff and marching 79 yards for a touchdown. What was surprising was that it turned out to be their only touchdown of the game. Number 60, Will Reeve, let Frank Kremblass know it would be no cakewalk. Late in the first quarter, the Webfoot's offense got in gear as Jim Shanley streaked for 22 yards. Jack Crabtree displayed the form that would earn him the game's most valuable player trophy. Crabtree's 5-yard option run put the Webfoots in scoring position.
From the Buckeye 5, Crabtree pitches to Shanley, sweeping to the left, cuts outside, touchdown Webfoots! And the Ducks are going crazy on the sideline. It's now a 1-point game, and Oregon will go for the tie.
The Buckeyes threatened again, but Sandy Frazier broke up a 4th down pass. Sophomore Willie West hit Ron Stover on one of his 10 receptions in the game. Darrell Ashbacker showed the Buckeyes how ugly the Ducklings could get. Crabtree was 10 of 17 passing, connecting with Stover, his favorite target once again. Number 85, Alden Kimbrough, experienced a receiver's nightmare, but hung on to the ball. In the third quarter, Oregon kept gaining momentum as Jack Morris fought for 15 yards. With a crowd involved in the 7-7 deadlock, Crabtree puts the Ducks in field goal range on an option run.
Oregon trying to take the lead. Jack Morris for a 34-yard field goal. It looks good, but no, it just misses. We're still tied at 7.
Ironically, in the fourth quarter, from exactly the same spot on the field, Jim Sutherland kicked a 34-yard field goal to put the Buckeyes ahead 10-7. Oregon made a valiant try late in the game with Charlie Tourville hitting Stover on another circus catch, but the Ducks fell short. Substitute end John Robinson, number 87, got in on the last play for Ron Stover. An Ohio State player mistook him for Stover and congratulated Robinson on his great play.
They put me in the last play of the game when the Ohio State quarterback fell on the ground, and the Ohio State guy hugged me and said, "Great game," and I said, "Thank you."
He was enthusiastic, just very, very enthusiastic, and a student of the game too. He always come up with that, even as a player. He'd come up, I don't know if because he wanted to get in the ball game or what, but he'd say, "Coach," he says, "I can get loose on this play. I can get loose on that play." And the enthusiasm carried over into the other squad, the whole squad.
For sophomore lineman Tom Keel, who Cass describes as the most determined player he ever coached, the Rose Bowl was the thrill of a lifetime.
And I got out there and I was a little bit skittish and a little bit scared, and I went after him kind of tentative. I really didn't go after him. He knocked me 5 yards back in the backfield. It was like getting cut with an axe. He hit me so hard it kind of numbed me. And when I was getting up, the same guy that knocked me back deflected the football. And as I was getting up off the ground, I caught the ball. And this is in 400,000 people, and I ran for a first down. And I could run fast. That was one of my characteristics. But I saw one guy between me and the goal line, and I ran right at him and got a first down. I always had a dream later on. I said, "Gee whiz, what if I'd avoided him, made a touchdown, and won the football game because we lost it by a field goal."
The Ducks gained more yards and first downs than Ohio State and held them to their lowest point production of the season. And they did it without Harry Mondale, injured in the third play of the game, and Captain Norm Chapman, who had broken his leg in the Washington State game. Joe Sheffield, who has been an assistant at Oregon for the last 14 years, took Mondale's place.
It was very tough. They were big and fast and strong, and I think probably our coaches got us, Cass, and coaches got us ready to play, and I believe they had degraded us so much that they just backed us in a corner, and we had to fight like heck to get out of it.
Although the Rose Bowl loss was frustrating for Coach Casanova and his staff, the players had done all he could ask of them, and the Ducks had proven the experts were wrong.
I think when the game was over, they basically apologized and said we should have won the ball game, and the Ohio State people were up rooting for us when the game was about over.
The 1957 year was a hard act to follow, but the Ducks almost did it. They finished second to Oklahoma in team defense, allowing only 50 points all season. Oregon faced number 1 Oklahoma, and this play, which was not ruled a fumble, cost the Ducks a possible tie or win. Cal went to the Rose Bowl, paced by quarterback Joe Camp. This rare defensive lapse was part of a very frustrating year, as the 1958 Ducks finished 4-6.
I felt as though we had an excellent football team, and we lost 6 games by a total of less than 50 points. We just didn't capitalize as well in a lot of those games that we lost by small margins.
One game that did not have a small margin was a 25-0 triumph over USC. Here, West runs for 66 yards. West led the 1958 Ducks in rushing and was selected All-Coast. Another consolation of the year was a 20-0 romp over the Beavers. Bob Grotkow and center Bob Peterson were All-Coast in 1958, and West and Peterson repeated those honors in 1959.
The tape will continue in just a few seconds.
The 1959 team finished 8-2 and came within 10 points of a perfect 10-0 season. On October 17, 1959, the Ducks pulled off one of the biggest upsets ever. Nationally ranked Air Force had not been beaten in 2 years. The Ducks smothered the Falcons 20-3. Dave Powell led the Ducks in rushing, and West and Kiel shared the Hoffman Award together. Emory Barnes was a 6'6", 225-pound All-Coast end, while Lou Barnes was an All-Coast and All-American wide receiver. He was used by high school coach Bill Walsh, now with the 49ers, as a refrigerator a la William Perry. His freshman coach at Oregon was John Robinson. His varsity coach was Len Casanova. And his first pro coach was George Hallis. Who was he? The advent of the computer was just one of the many changes seen on campus in the 60s.
Through 1963, the Ducks weren't independent, went to 2 bowl games, and just missed going to 2 more. 1966 marked the end of the Len Casanova 16-year tenure and 48 years of playing football at Hayward Field. In the era of change, Oregon began the late 60s with a new coach and a new stadium.
The 1960 team tied its last regular season game with Oregon State. They finished 8th nationally in total offense and lost only 2 games, one to Michigan and the other to Rose Bowl-bound Washington. Their outstanding season earned them a trip to the Liberty Bowl in Philadelphia versus Penn State. It was a close game in the snow for 3 quarters, but Penn State pulled away in the 4th. Dave Grayson, the leading ground gainer in 1960, remembers a game against Washington State that year.
We were beating Washington State. The score was 12-0 at halftime. And Kaz would come out and he would put his cigarette down and put it out on the meeting room floor, and he would say, "What's the score?" And we were supposed to say 0-0. And a rah, rah, rah. Well, this particular time, Len Burnett said the score is 12-0. And everything was silent, and Kaz didn't know what to say. In fact, he kind of stumbled for the rest of the afternoon.
All-Coast players were Dave Gross, guard Dave Urell, and sophomore tackle Steve Barnett.
To Hilliard, and Hilliard is hit by Barnett.
The 1961 Ducks kept on trying as they did in this 1907 win over Stanford, but wound up a disappointing 4-6. In that game, sophomore Mel Renfro, playing with a sore ankle, turned in a spectacular performance. He touched the ball 5 times and scored 3 times on a 94-yard kickoff return, a 39-yard option pass, and a 4-yard run. Renfro, from Jefferson High School in Portland, and probably the most highly recruited football player to come to Oregon, tells why he chose Oregon.
I guess the recruiters from Oregon got to my parents, and my parents were sold on Len Casanova and Bill Barman as the track coach, and I think the pendulum really swung when my parents told me that they would like for me to go to Oregon, so that's what I did.
In 1961, Steve Barnett became Oregon's 8th All-American.
Ron Snydell, who was the another two-way player at that time. We both averaged about 58 minutes a game, which is a lot of playing time, and our senior years. So it does get tiring, and I'm not sure you're always as effective as you can be, but at the time we enjoyed it and thought that we were invincible.
Renfro and guard Mickey Orting were named All-Coast, and end Kent Peterson won the Hoffman Award. The 1962 Ducks opened the season against Powerhouse, Texas, with a little-known sophomore at quarterback. Oregon beat themselves on 2 fumbles, but had found a quarterback.
Bob Berry rolling left. A man clear Imwally at about the 35. Imwally blocked for Murphy's, down to about the 20. 15. Dick Imwally headed for the end zone, out of bounds at the 1-yard line.
Bob was a fun type of guy. I mean, just tough as nails. Get in the huddle, and you know, it's bleep it, bleep it, bleep it, you know, and we're going to get him. You know, just a terrific athlete, a tough athlete, could throw the ball extremely well.
Berry and Renfro were at times unstoppable. The Ducks won 6 games and tied Rose Bowl-bound Washington 21-21. On the last play of the Washington game, Oregon might have won, but some kids ran into the end zone, interfering with Berry's pass to Larry Hill. The 1962 Civil War game in Corvallis was one of the closest and most intensive ever played.
Bob Berry back to pass. He's looking down the middle, almost falls. The pass is on the way. It's at 10-yard line. It's Renfro, complete. Touchdown, Oregon.
The Ducks took the lead 17-6 at the half on this 38-yard Buck Corey field goal.
And I was told prior to that game that if we won that game, we would go to the Bluebonnet Bowl. And I debated whether to tell the kids before the game or tell them when to tell them. So with that score, I thought, well, at halftime, I decided to tell them at halftime. And I didn't get much of a reaction. I could never understand that. Didn't get much of a reaction. Not a lot of hoorays and everything else from the squad. Well, we went out that second half, and we had more misfortune in that second half, and they beat us by 3 points.
Brooks back to kick. It's a squibber going down to the 5. Renfro waiting there. Oh, he hit him in the knee. Beavers recovered.
The Beavers, led by Heisman Trophy winner Terry Baker, came back in the second half. Oregon State won 20-17, despite the brilliant play of Dave Wilcox.
To me, it was kind of like a chess game, and I could see everything in front of me. That's the reason I like defense, because I knew if the play was run a certain way offensively, I knew where all the offensive people were going to be. Now, what got screwed up is when one of those guys didn't know what they were doing and ran the wrong way and got everybody messed up. But it's not such a hard. I mean, it's in playing defense and in football, it's better to give than receive. And I mean, you're going to get hurt a lot of times if you're not playing 100%, and if you're just sitting kind of catching people. No, that's when you get hurt. Besides Lund Casanova, one of the reasons that I like the University of Oregon as opposed to Oregon State. Now, my parents were from Oklahoma. They came out, and Prothero was a big Southerner, so he came over. My parents wanted me to go to Oregon State. But the uniforms at Oregon State were awful. They just were horrible, worst-looking things I've ever seen. And I liked Oregon's uniforms. Now, that's really an intelligent decision.
The epitome of Civil War was high school teammates Mel Renfro and Terry Baker battling each other. The talent-laden 1962 Ducks had Barnett making All-Coast for the 3rd time and All-American for the 2nd time. Mickey Orting gained All-Coast for the 2nd time, and team co-captain Ron Snydell was All-Coast and named the team's outstanding player. In 1962, Mel Renfro became Oregon's 9th All-American, an honor he repeated in 1963.
I didn't feel like anybody could stop me. I felt like if you put 11 guys defensively against me, I would find a way to defeat them. Sports was always a game to me. You know, it was never a business. It's like sandlot football. The game that really stands out in my mind more than any other was when I played in Houston in '62 at Rice Stadium, when my grandparents and a lot of my relatives came to see the ball game, and Houston was where I was born, and I hadn't been back there in many years, and the the headlines read after the game that, Renfro runs Rice ragged. And actually I felt like that was probably my best performance overall in college, offensively, defensively, and, in the specialty area.
I think Mel is the finest all-around football player that I ever coached.
He was by far and away the best college football player I had ever seen, and the things he could do were just unbelievable. For instance, in the huddle, I'd say, "Melvin, what pattern can you get open on?" And he'd say, "Anything you want." He would. He was great.
The 1963 team had lots of firepower as their backfield, composed of Bob Berry, Mel Renfro, Lou Bain, and Larry Hill, was called the Firehouse Four. In that year, one of the most memorable games in Oregon history took place.
Here's Nowatzki's kick. Ball is down, it's up, and it's good. Indiana takes a 1-point lead. Ball is on the Oregon 37-yard line. Here's the snap. Berry dropping back to the left side. Looks down the middle. Renfro, it's Renfro. Great one-hand catch. Renfro's got it. First down, Oregon. 18 seconds to go. Ducks at the Indiana 30. Berry rolling right. Looking down, looking into the end zone. H.D. Murphy's in the end zone. He's got it. The Ducks win.
Yeah, the game was like a symphony. It just developed into that crescendo at the end, and was just a great, exciting contest.
The 1963 Ducks went 7-3, including a 31-14 thumping of Oregon State. Renfro was injured and could not play, but Bain, Hill, and H.D. Murphy took up the slack. Renfro was named All-American for the second time. The Ducks earned a trip to El Paso to play in the first Sun Bowl game and downed SMU 21-14.
We, I think, approached that game in a sort of a fun manner. We went down to win, but we had a lot of time off, and we really enjoyed ourselves down there. You might say it was sort of a Christmas holiday for us, but when it came game time, we did what we had to do to win the game.
3 points separated the 1964 Ducks from a 10-0 season and the Rose Bowl. The Ducks started strong, beating Rip Engel's Penn State team 22-14. The Ducks made it 6 in a row versus Washington in Seattle.
Has a man in motion going left now. Berry with the snap. Fakes the handoff. Here's the throw into the 4-yard line. It's Lowell Dean. He scores. Tackle eligible.
Counting the 1963 season, the Ducks had won 10 in a row and were ranked number 7 in the nation until they met underdog Stanford. Bob Berry was injured, but still Oregon led 8-7 until this play.
And I'll never forget this. Doug Post was our punter, and he punted, and he was just flattened. I mean, flat on the ground, roughed, and it wasn't called. And with, I think, 13 seconds to go, then they kicked a field goal and beat us 10-8. After the game, the Stanford coaches came up, and they said, "How the dickens that official didn't call that play?" Well, we could have run out the clock with the time that they had, and we should have had that victory.
With the next week, the Ducks barely tied Washington State, and then fell behind Indiana 21-7 at halftime of the next game.
John Robinson, now the coach of the Rams, was one of my assistants, and he said, "We've got to change things." And I said, "We're not going to change anything." He said, "These guys got to just get out and play some ball." And I ranted and raved practically the whole first half, telling them the things that they had been doing wrong and everything else.
I think it was, in my recollection, one of Kaz's most motivating halftime speeches. He actually used some words that I'd never heard him use before, and I'm sure he got everybody's attention. He got mine.
During this time, Dave Toby, who was my center and also kicked off for me, got up to go to the bathroom, and I told him, I said, "Dave, sit down." So he went over and sat down, and on the ensuing kickoff in the second half, we were kicking off to Indiana, and he shanked the ball, and it went down about 12-15 yards, and Les Palm was up there, fell on it for an onside kick. After the game, all the press and saying, "What a great strategy that was, how you were behind and you needed to get a hold of that ball and to score." And actually what happened, and Dave said, Toby said later, he says, boy, he says, I had to go to the bathroom so badly that he says I could hardly swing my leg in there, and that's what actually happened. It wasn't a case of any strategy at all.
Oregon scored 22 unanswered points to beat Indiana in one of their greatest comebacks. All Coast Guard Mark Richards remembers.
Coach Cass came into the locker room and said, well, maybe better not repeat that. But knowing we went out in the second half and put together probably the almost perfect second half, and every time we went to the line of scrimmage, we knew that Bob would complete the pass. And I don't think we ran the ball once in the second half, but it was a fantastic game.
Oregon's heartbreaking last-minute loss to Oregon State ended a 7-2-1 season and kept Oregon out of a bowl game. Center Dave Tobey was All-Coast, and Ray Palm set a school record for receptions with 42. In 1964, Bob Berry broke all of Oregon's passing records and became Oregon's 10th All-American.
He had the entire squad and the entire coaching staff just believing in him that he could do it. You put Berry in there and he'll do it. And he usually did.
The 1965 Webfoots were picked in the preseason top 10 and started out 3-0 until they met Stanford again.
4th down, 15. Lewis back to pass, looking down the left side. Passes high, incomplete. Oh, there's a flag on the play. Looks like interference.
The Ducks only won one more game the rest of the season. Dick Wynn was the team's leading ball carrier for the second straight year. Quarterback Mike Brundage from Roseburg led the Ducks in passing, and Steve Bunker caught 51 passes to break Palm's record and led the team in scoring with 56 points. The defense, led by number 40, linebacker Tim Casey, was called Casey's Commandos. Casey was also a first-team academic All-American. 3 plays in 1966 continue to carry with them vivid memories for 3 different players. For linebacker Gunther Cunningham, now a defensive line coach with the San Diego Chargers, a play against Stanford was an unforgettable experience.
And, it was a 3rd down play in about an inch, and they ran the tailback up inside, and I was an inside linebacker, and I weighed about 210, I think, at the time, and Jack Root happened to be the leading blocker, and I didn't have any teeth left in my head. These are all false teeth that you see now, and cut my lip severely, my arm all up. I had blood from head to toe. And I came to the sideline. All I can remember is John Robinson saying, boy, this is a hell of a game, isn't it, Gun? And it was just blood spattered, and my face mask was broken. And they punted the ball, and we stopped him. And I played the whole game, and the trainer there at the time told me, just put some tape in your mouth. It'll be all right. So I did it. And
Bob, was that Bob Officer?
You bet it was Bob Officer. And I played the whole football game. And the great thing about it is we beat them 7-3, and they had a really good team.
And what about Root? What's he doing?
Well, there's another twist to the story. I went on to coach at Stanford, and one of the people that helped recruit for me at Stanford was Jack Root, who's a dentist.
I was real lucky in that the receiver slipped and picked off the ball at my shoe tops. I managed to hurdle over a guy, and then Jim Nicolason made a key block that knocked 2 men out of the way, and then it was just straight ahead. And the thing I remember the most about it, though, was how tired I was, because it was at 7,000 feet where it happened, and I was gasping for breath, and then the whole team jumped on top of me.
Of course, I've replayed that 1,000 times in my mind. It was the highlight of my college career.
On the last play of the 1966 season, another record was set.
A linebacker by the name of Harry Cartelis. Now, he was slow as buttermilk going uphill, so he threw the ball off to me, you know, and 96-yard touchdown resulted.
Smith was named All-Coast as a defensive back in Kaz's last season as a coach.
Of course, Kaz has always been the the father figure, you know, for the players, and you know, I appreciate the things that that he taught me. You know, we used to have some good conversations, and he taught me a lot more about football, but a lot of things about life.
In 1966, another defensive back, Tim Temple from Pendleton, who blocked many extra points and field goals, was the Hoffman Award winner. Leo Harris was Oregon's first athletic director and served from 1947 to 1967.
I can recall being a student or a freshman incoming student at the University of Oregon and hearing Leo Harris talk about his dream and this particular stadium. Lo and behold, little did I know that I would be the person that would eventually complete it. But it was my privilege, and it was certainly the stadium buy of the century in terms of dollars and cents. I remember taking the model back to Cleveland, Ohio, and displaying it in the National Convention. People saying there's no way you can build that for $2 1/4 million, and there's no way you can have it done in 1 year. In both cases, of course, it was done and ready, and remains today as a real monument to him and to Oregon football, a very fine football stadium for both spectators and for players.
With the new stadium came a new head coach. Kaz's line coach from 1958 to 1966, Jerry Fry. In Fry's first year, the Ducks continually improved. The Ducks' defense was quick and tough, led by all-coast nose guard George Dames.
We put together a group of guys that were as aggressive and active as any group that I can remember. I think we were second or third in the conference in defense.
Jimmy Smith
Jimmy Smith, Omri Hildreth, George Dames, Kent Grote, a number of really not very big guys. You know, we didn't scare anybody getting off the bus, but we played very well.
The Ducks were the only team in 1967 to hold down O.J. Simpson.
USC with OJ with his speed, 9.3, 100 speed, would try to run around you basically, and he our defense was well suited to stop that, and so he was averaging 185 yards a game, and lo and behold, we stopped him. We stopped him. He had 65 yards, and then in the third quarter, I finally got in on a tackle, and we put him out of the game. And ironically, that started a friendship, and he has never forgotten me. I'm sure he's met millions of people, but he's never forgotten my name.
The season ended on a frustrating note, though, against the Beavers. Mark Scholl's field goal and a 1-yard plunge by Claxton Welch put the Ducks ahead 10-0 after 3 quarters. But the Beavers, known that year as the Giant Killers, scored 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns on some long drives led by Steve Priest and Bill Earthquake Enyard. Jimmy Smith was selected to 5 All-American teams, becoming Oregon's 11th All-American. He also was the #1 draft pick of the Washington Redskins.
Jim Yazoo Smith was probably as fine an athlete as I'd ever seen in those days. They had a guy named Earl McCullough at USC who was a great receiver. They called him Earl the Pearl. And I remember him covering him man-to-man through that whole game. You couldn't find McCullough on the film because Yazoo was all over him.
In 1968, the Ducks kept improving and almost pulled off the biggest upset in Oregon history. John McKay's USC Trojans came to Autzen undefeated and led 13-0 through the third quarter. But then, one of the exciting games in Oregon history unfolded.
Sagi back to pass. Down the right side, it is intercepted by Gleason at the 45. Down the sideline, out of bounds, inside the 25. Eric Olson now in at quarterback. Ducks at the 16-yard line. Olson with the snap, rolling to the right side. Looks down to the end zone. It's Bobby Newland. Great catch. Olson turns heads to Hearn. Hearn leaps into the end zone. Touchdown, Oregon. Ducks celebrate now as they pull to within 1 touchdown. Here's the kickoff. Ken Woody approaching the ball for the Ducks. It's down the right side. A Battle waiting for USC at the 10-yard line. Picks it up. Battle coming up the left side. Hit at about the 20. There's a fumble. Looks like the Ducks have it. It's Terry Ranstead on the ball for Oregon. Here's the snap. Olson under center. Turns. Hands to Hearn. He's diving. The ball is loose at the goal line. It's kicked out to the 1. Here's Olson picking it up. He scores. Trojans at their 30-yard line with the ball. It's Steve Sagi handing to O.J. Simpson. Simpson drops the ball. It's recovered by Oregon. Jack Rust recovers for the Ducks.
The Ducks couldn't score after USC's 3rd straight turnover, so the score remained 13-13 until the end of the 4th quarter.
2:52 left in the game. 3rd down and 10 at the inside the Duck 1. This may be the Ducks' last chance. Olson deep in the end zone. He's going to throw. He's got Greg Lindsey down the sideline. It's complete at the 45. 50. Lindsey fumbles. and the Trojans are going to get it. They recover at their own 35. Ball at the Oregon 39-yard line.
The Trojans received a questionable pass interference call, and so the ball was placed at the 1-yard line where USC scored to make it 20-13. But the Fighting Ducks didn't give up.
51 seconds to go in the ball game. Wilson back to pass. Has a little time. It's Tippenmauer. Gets it at the 40. He's at the 35. 30 in Trojan territory. Still going down to 25 and knocked down at the 17-yard line. Ducks at the Trojan 17. It's Olson. A pass again. He's back. Has a man rushing. He throws it in grasp. It's complete. Newland at the 8-yard line. Ducks 2nd and 1 at the Trojan 8-yard line. We have 28 seconds to go. Olson up under center, gets the snap, comes back to the right side, has Welch at the goal line. He can't get it. 3rd down and 8. Ducks at the Trojan 8-yard line. Here's the Olson now rolling to the right side, drops way back, throws under the end zone. It's too far. This is it. 4th down at the 8-yard line. 17 seconds to go. Olson. Here's a big rush by the Trojans. Throws at the goal line. Newland can't get it.
Omri Hildreth was named the nation's top defensive player of the week for his performance against the Trojans. George Dames was All-Coast for the 2nd straight year. One of the coaches responsible for inspiring the defense was Norm Chapman.
He did a great job for us at practice. I mean, if you were a player and you weren't ready to go, he'd make sure he'd get you to go, and he'd dive up over the piles. And I always remember him bleeding from the nose or something where he butted a linebacker, and he was going to demonstrate everything. And, you know, I'm 41 years old now, and the coaches here in the league always say, Gun, you're going to wear out. And what I do, I try to demonstrate everything we do and run around very enthusiastically. And I think that's how I learned to play. And I think it goes back to anything. When you learn something from people you really have a lot of respect for, such as Norm Chapman, you're going to continue that way throughout your career.
Although from 1966 to 1968, Claxton Welch never played on a team with a record above 500, he still felt like a winner.
There was no one in college football that had bigger hearts than the guys in our team. We always worked hard. We worked harder than everybody else. And I really picked up a good work ethic by playing at the University of Oregon.
Coach Fry had the Fighting Ducks improving again in 1969 to 5-5-1 as some talented sophomores contributed. Andy Maurer, a senior in 1969, remembers one of the sophomores.
Jerry Fry says, I think you ought to become a tight end. And I said, no, there's no way. There's no rookie around that's large enough or good enough that can beat me out. So I'll just keep my spot. And so the rookies line up in front and the veterans in back. You know how we do our tryouts and all this stuff. And I watched a kid by the name of Bobby Moore, now Ahmad Rashad. He ran down, put a move on the corner, caught the ball, stuffed it behind his back, and I never competed against him. I went right to Jerry and says, I'd like to be a tight end.
With Maurer at tight end, Bobby Moore at flanker, and Bob Newland at split end, quarterback Tom Blanchard probably had the best receiving corps in the country.
Tom, given the injuries he had about as good a career as a guy could have at Oregon. And if he hadn't hurt his knee, I'm sure he would have had several years playing as a quarterback in the NFL. He still had a great career in the NFL, punting for 10 or 11 years, and one of those years he was all NFL as a punter. Tom was one of the great quiet leaders of the years that I was playing football at Oregon.
Moore was All-Coast, and in that year set records for TD receptions with 10 and scoring with 92 points.
Coach Bill Walsh was was the head coach for my high school team my junior year, and he installed, although we didn't call it refrigerator series at that time, we called it the elephant series.
Steve Barnett and Mel Renfro are Oregon's only two-time All-Americans. Barnett was also an academic All-American. He was the first Oregon player to score a touchdown in Autzen Stadium. The early 1970s saw the addition of the Law Center, Oregon Hall, and the tennis courts. It was a time when the fair-weather fans were separated from the diehards, as the Ducks, under 4 different coaches, produced the worst one-loss record of any decade, despite winning teams in 1970 and 1979.
The addition of the 2 Arizona schools in 1978 to form the Pac-10 just made things tougher. But by the end of the decade, the Ducks were making believers out of their fans and the rest of the Pac-10.
In 1970, two more sophomores made their debut in the season opener against California.
Blanchard, before he got hurt, threw me a pass. First pass of my varsity career. It's great. Boy, this is really fun. And came head high, bounced off my hands, over my head. Cal guy intercepted it, and off he goes down the field. I'm thinking I'm lucky to have a seat on a bus back to Eugene. Nevertheless, Blanchard goes down, and here comes Fouts. Skinny little kid, and everybody had heard about him, but nobody had seen him. He comes in the huddle, and he says, we're going to put one up on these bastards. And I don't know if he called the play or if Robbie did, but we think, all right, hey, okay, let's do it, because it's early in the game. And I knew it wasn't going to come to me because I was tied in and I'm real slow. And it would have taken me a couple of days to get down the field. Nevertheless, back he goes, and I'm down and turning, and I'm running a curl or something to try and draw the safety. And Newland's going down the right sideline, just going like a bat out of hell. And Dan drops back and lofts one. And it's about 60 yards in the air, and Newland's going full tilt. He stretches his arms out, ball hits his hands and falls. Now, and the crowd going, oh. Not only did they see something bad happen, which was Newland dropping the ball, they saw the talent of Dan Fouts come out. And beyond that, as evidence of him being the great quarterback he is now, he was a great guy. He was always a lot of fun, had a real sharp wit. You couldn't have a thin skin to be around Dan Fouts, but I'm privileged to call him a friend.
Just 4 weeks later, Fouts and Specht would team up on one of the most memorable plays in Oregon football history. On October 10th, the Ducks met UCLA in the Coliseum, with both teams needing a win to keep their Rose Bowl hopes alive. Oregon moved the ball well as Dan Fouts scored twice in the first quarter, on a 15-yard quarterback draw, and later on a quarterback sneak. Here, Bobby Moore, now known as Ahmad Rashad, who had been switched from flanker to tailback at the beginning of the season, put Oregon ahead 21-10 with his second quarter touchdown. But from then on, it was all Bruins, as they scored 30 unanswered points. Oregon almost scored in the third quarter.
The reason that I had to leave the game because of injuries, because we tried another quarterback sneak on about the 1 yard line for a touchdown, and Jim Fagoni, my center, lost the grip on the ball as he was snapping it, and it rolled between my legs, and I was down looking for the ball between my legs, and I got hit by about 6 Bruins, and they knocked me out.
The Bruins' last score came with 4:38 left in the game as Dennis Dummett hit Gary Campbell, now a backfield coach at Oregon.
Under any ordinary circumstances, you would think that a game that you're at least 20 points ahead, and at the end of the game that you're, in all probability, you're going to win the game, and you send in your reserves to give them some playing time. This was not to be an ordinary game.
At this point, with a score of 40-21, thousands of Bruin fans left the stadium.
4 minutes to go in the Coliseum. I can recall Jess Hill from USC and J.D. Morgan both saying to us, well, congratulations, your young men played a magnificent game.
When UCLA scored their last points, that I really virtually closed my playbook upstairs. I was in the press box, and I said to myself, we've lost.
Coach Fry was a real wonderful person to me because I was hurt all the time, and that hurt Coach Fry. He, when Dan went out of the game, he came up to me as a senior and said, Tom, if you want to go in and play, I'm asking you to make that decision. But he says, I'm not going to make you because Dan's getting the crap kicked out of him, and we're probably not going to win the game. So if you don't want to play, fine, we'll put Harvey in, one of our other good quarterbacks. He was our third quarterback at the time. And I didn't want to go in, but I was a senior, and I couldn't very well say, no, I don't want to go in, Coach. So I said, sure, I'll go in.
Blanchard looks over the defense, steps back to pass, looks right, finds Bob Newland out there, caught by Newland at the 45 in UCLA territory and out at the 40.
It was kind of a wet feeling out on the field, and I was really tired. Ahmad Rashad came walking into the huddle and made the statement that, hey guys, let's pick it up. I can score anywhere in this field in 10 seconds.
The Ducks at the UCLA 30, 4:17 to go, 2nd and 10 for Oregon. Back to pass, Blanchard looks right. Looks for Bobby Moore. Has him in the open at the UCLA 22. Caught by Bobby at the 20. Down to the 15. Wrapped up by one man. Gets away. 10-5 touchdown. University of Oregon. How did Bobby Moore get away from that one?
And all of a sudden, I wasn't so tired anymore, and there was a feeling in the offense that, heck, whoever had the ball last was going to end up winning the game, and all we needed to do was get the ball back.
Oregon lining up for the kickoff. Ken Woody to kick it for the Ducks. Onside kick to the left. Rolls down to the 50-yard line to the 47, 46. Scramble for the football. And who's got it? UCLA has come up with possession of the football. Nader up behind center. 3rd and 8 for the Bruins. The clock running under 3 minutes to go. Nader rolls left, wants to pitch back, throws behind his tailback. Mike Johnson hits the quarterback, and Delton Lewis comes up with it for Oregon at the UCLA 40-yard line. Blanchard back to pass, looks left, nobody open, looks right, Moore out of the backfield, down the right sidelines, wide open, Bobby Moore at the 25, 15, 10, 5, touchdown, University of Oregon. Bobby Moore wide open. The Ducks with only one timeout left. They do need the ball back. Let's see what happens. Woody approaches the football, kicks it down to the UCLA 50 to the left side, scramble for the football at the 49. Oregon has recovered. Blanchard calling the play. He goes right, pitches right, Bobby Moore. Blanchard leading the way over the right tackle spot. Bobby, no place to go, knocked down at the 45. Oregon calls a timeout.
I went to the sideline. John Robinson was my coach, and Jerry Fry, they looked in my eyes and they said, "What is wrong?" I had tears in my eyes. And I said, "Nothing." It wasn't because I was courageous. It was because I was embarrassed to tell him I was hurt again.
And he gets up, and he's Rocky, and he comes running over the sideline. Well, John Robinson, Robbie, yells at me, "Check him." So I thought it was his jaw, and so did Robbie. So I went over and I said, "How is it?" And he says, "Oh, it's my shoulder." So I reached inside his shoulder pad, and I could feel the bone sticking up, and I knew it was an AC separation right there. He says, I'm all right, I can go back in." So later he told me that he hoped that they would not call a pass play, but sure enough they did. Well, it turned out that was the last one.
Tommy looking over the UCLA 4-man defensive front. Now the Bruins set 5-man up front. Blanchard back to pass, wants to find somebody long, looks to the left sidelines, throws long for Leland Glass. Leland down there with 2 UCLA Bruins wrestle for the football at the 11-yard line. Oregon has possession of it. It goes to the University of Oregon. They are back in this football game.
I got poked in my eye right before I caught this pass. I saw 2 balls. I just jumped up. Whichever one I felt like just grabbed it.
The play was ruled a simultaneous catch down on the 5-yard line. But now Leland's got to go out of the game because he can't see. Tom's got to go out of the game because his arm is hanging there. So they send in Ken Woody, our place kicker, as Leland's replacement.
Fouts looking over the defense. Hands off to Moore. Bobby behind the block over right guard. 7-yard line, 6, 5-yard line. Looking over the defense, Danny calls the play. Line is set. Fouts rolls right. Looking to pass. Danny trying to find somebody open, being chased back at the UCLA 11 and wrestled down at the 15.
The next play, we were in a I slot formation with the 2 wide receivers to the left and just the tight end and the tailback behind me. And we swung Bobby Moore out to the right side. The Bruins, Moore had scored on this play 3 or 4 times, 2 times earlier. They went all after him.
3rd down on the UCLA 14, 15 to go for the touchdown. Bout sets the team at the line of scrimmage. Danny wants to pass, drops straight back in the pocket, looks over the middle. Greg Specht is there in the end zone. Touchdown, caught Greg Specht.
Dan threw a perfect strike. I saw it coming. I could see the ball twirl, and I'm thinking, Jesus, this is easy. Just don't drop it, or my folks won't let me come home. There it was. It was very simple. It was over too quick. That was probably the biggest throw of my career.
I think I've never seen an offensive game plan work as well as that one did that day. And I think John Robinson deserves a lot of credit for that.
The excitement that we had offensively, I was an assistant that worked with the offense, and we put 3 touchdowns on the board, one after the other, and did it in a manner that really gave us a lot of pleasure. So it was one of the big games for me.
This certainly had to be the most exciting football game I've ever seen or ever have been around.
And I told myself after that game, I will never, ever decide that the game is over until it's over. And I think I've carried that with me. So it was a great learning experience for me.
And at the end of the ball game, I was able to shake J.D.'s hand and say, J.D., your young men certainly played magnificently.
UCLA played us the year before at Autzen Stadium. I think the final score is 17-14. Anyway, it was about the last minute or so of the game, and we were trying to get the ball back, and so they were running the clock out. And this is something I'd never seen happen before. Dennis Dummett was the quarterback, and he came up to the line of scrimmage, And before calling signals, he kind of got down over the quarterback, over the center, and he kind of yelled out so all the defensive players could hear it, "You guys always come so close." And I'll tell you, that was the first time I really wanted to just pile on somebody. So the next year, after we came back and after the game and the handshakes were being handed out, I went up to Dennis and said, "You guys always come so close."
The win over UCLA was just one of 3 big wins in 1970 as Oregon finished 6-4-1. The Ducks edged USC 10-7 in a driving rain at Autzen. 2 weeks later, Air Force, ranked in the top 10 and the nation's top-rated passing team, met Oregon, the second-rated passing offense in the country. Dan Fouts and Bob Newland were at the top of their game as they both set school records. Fouts for the most yards passing in a game, and Newland for the most receptions in a game with 11. In the last minute of the first half, Fouts drove the Ducks down the field, completing every pass, including a last-second touchdown to Newland and 2-point conversion. Newland caught a long touchdown pass later in the game to sew up the victory, 46-35. After the Air Force game, the Ducks were rated 17th in the country, but could only manage a last-minute tie against a hungry Army team that had won only 1 game all season. The last score for Oregon came on one of Rashad's greatest runs.
I remember the Army game when we had to tie them with the fourth quarter to escape getting beat. We called just a simple blast play up the middle to Ahmad, and he literally ran through the entire Army team, right up the middle, 50 yards or so. And he was exhausted. He'd already played an entire game. Here he takes the ball down and scores. And now we're still down by 2 points. We've got to go for the 2-point conversion. We call a little sprint out and a pass to Ahmad. Gets hit by 2 Army guys and struggles to get in that end zone for the 2-point conversion. It was one of the greatest efforts I've ever been associated with.
The season ended on a sour note with Oregon's 7th straight loss to the Beavers. Tom Graham, an inspirational leader, was All-Pac-8 as a linebacker along with senior defensive back Lionel Coleman. In 1970, Rashad was named All-Pac-8 for the second time as he became Oregon's first 1,000-yard runner. More all-time records were set in 1970. Against Illinois, Tom Blanchard hit Bob Newland on Oregon's longest pass-run play of 95 yards. Newland's 225 yards receiving in that game is also a school record. Bob Newland from North Eugene High School became Oregon's 12th first-team All-American.
Robbie was the kind of coach that had me believing when I was a senior that I was the best wide receiver in America.
He was a real enthusiastic, holler type of guy. The thing I remember most about Robbie was he taught us so much about the passing game. When I went from Oregon into the NFL, I felt like I knew a lot, and I think that was a big factor in my being able to make the team on the Saints when I was a rookie. And Robbie was a teacher, he was enthusiastic, we always had fun. Practices were fun, games were fun, and football was never drudgery.
Newland also still holds the records for most receptions in a season with 67 and total yards in 1 year with 1,123. In 1971, the Ducks again went into the last 2 weeks of the season with a chance to win at least 7 games. But they finished below 500 as they lost 2 close ones. The highlight of the season was the second consecutive win over USC. In the Coliseum, second-string quarterback Harvey Wynn, replacing an injured Dan Fouts, turned in a gritty performance. Wynn threw for 3 touchdowns against the Trojans, the big one a 60-yarder to Larry Battle. 1 week later, the 4th largest crowd in Autzen Stadium history saw the Ducks down the Huskies 23-21. Dave Piper's interception return of a Sonny Six-Killer pass sparked a 23-point second-half explosion by the Ducks. Against Oregon State, the Ducks played well despite missing Rashad and Tom Graham due to injuries. Oregon lost a heartbreaking decision to the Beavers 30-29. That 1 point not only was the difference between a winning and a losing season, but proved to be the fatal blow to Jerry Fry's competitive program that he had built. Under alumni pressure, Fry resigned a few months after that season ended. Linebacker Steve Rennie shared the Hoffman Award with Rashad in 1971. Defensive back Bill Drake from Portland, seen here running back an interception against Stanford, was named All-Pac-8 along with guard John McKean. Leland Glass led the Ducks in receiving and always battled for more yards. Tackle Tom Drugas from Sunset High School in Portland opened many holes for the running backs and protected the quarterbacks. Drugas was not only the first-round draft pick of the Baltimore Colts, he also became Oregon's 13th All-American.
I think a lot of the strengths of my pick on All-American teams had to do with my ability in the eyes of scouts to be a pro candidate. And I think that a lot of people looked at me because of some of the other people that were on the team that I played on that they were looking at. So they looked at us all together. But in particular, I think it was a combination of my size, my pass blocking ability, and my ability to just work within a pro offense.
Drugas was always complaining about Stambaugh stepping on his feet, and I was always complaining about Stokes being offsides, and Stambaugh was always complaining about me being a sophomore. So we had a lively huddle.
Ahmad Rashad was named All-Pac-8 for the third time, and in 1971 became Oregon's 14th All-American. In that year against Utah, he ran for 249 yards and still holds 14 other school records, including points scored, most pass receptions, and most yards rushing.
Records were made to be broken, but they were made to be broken by great players. And it's going to take a great player to come along and break those records, because I was in an offensive system that really took advantage of my offensive talents. And it makes me feel good that those records that were set 15 or some years ago are still standing now, but I'm sure they'll be broken. Maybe my son will break them.
The sacrifice that he made to become a running back in an I-back in a high formation, it's really probably underestimated, because he sacrificed a great deal. He was probably one of the toughest players I've ever played with. He took tremendous beating week after week.
I had to be talked into being a running back because I enjoyed playing the outside and not dealing with those linebackers or defensive linemen. But after I got the hang of it, and I'd say I got the hang of it after the Stanford game, I think I carried the ball for 20 sometimes for -3 yards. After that game, I got the hang of it, and I wasn't too bad of a running back. I enjoyed it. It's a totally different frame of mind you have to go into a game as running back as opposed to wide receiver. Wide receiver is sort of an artiste sort of position, and running back is a workhorse, and you got to be serious about it.
Jerry Fry's line coach, Dick Enright, became the new head coach for 1972 and 1973. Enright inherited such future NFL players as Fouts, Tim Stokes, George Martin, and Russ Francis.
I have a lot of fond memories of not only going to the University of Oregon, but also playing there. I really only played one full year because of injuries, and freshmen weren't allowed to play and that type of thing, and then I didn't play my senior year, and they had a couple of coaching changes. It was very exciting, but the year that I did play, I had a great time just playing SC and Stanford and that type of thing. I still root for the Ducks whenever they're playing.
In 1972, Donnie Reynolds' 60-yard run in the first quarter was all the Ducks needed as they trounced Oregon State 30-3 and ended the 8-year famine. The victory over the Beavers was a win-it-for-the-Gipper story, as the Ducks had dedicated the game to a dying Alan Eustace. As a sophomore the year before, Eustace had made honorable mention All-Coast at defensive end. Fouts and his favorite target, Greg Speck, were both named All-Pac-8, but the Ducks finished only 4-7. Oregon was the only team in the Pac-8 to offer Fouts a scholarship, and in Johnny Robinson's mind, made more of his talent than any other player he coached at Oregon.
Well, of course, Dan Fouts, who will be in the NFL Hall of Fame, one of the great NFL quarterbacks of all time, came to Oregon without being heavily recruited, developed a tremendous skill level here. In my mind, clearly, he is the one above all others.
In 1973, the Ducks won only 2 games, and one of them was the most bizarre ever played. In the first quarter, against Jim Owens' Huskies, Steve Donnelly returned to punt 78 yards. The Ducks went on to rout Washington 58-0. What was more strange but true was that the very next year, Owen's team skunked the Ducks 66-0. In 1973, Steve Donnelly was All-Pac-8, an honor he repeated in 1974. Tight end Russ Francis from Pleasant Hill was All-Pac-8 also, along with defensive tackle Reggie Lewis. Donnie Reynolds became the second player to run for over 1,000 yards in a season. A game versus Air Force in 1973 still carries with it good memories for current New York Giant defensive end George Martin.
We played Air Force one year in Oregon, and we weren't supposed to win that game, and we went out and gave them a very good go of it, and I hit the quarterback in the end zone, which forced up an interception, and a gentleman who went on to make his mark in the pros, Mario Clark, intercepted and ran in for a touchdown, and that's one of my great memories at the U of O.
In 2 short years, the coach whose team finally beat Oregon State and who humiliated Washington was gone. Don Reed, Enright's offensive coordinator, took over for the next 3 years. Reed tried to inject a more wide-open offense to complement senior Don Reynolds, who finished in 1974 as Oregon's second all-time ground gainer. Quarterback Jack Henderson and receiver Greg Bauer were key players for Reed during 1975 and 1976. Bruising fullback George Bennett also contributed. Mario Clark, a first-round draft pick of the Buffalo Bills, was All-Pac-8 in 1975, and defensive backfield teammate Chuck Wills won the Hoffman Award. 1975 was also the beginning of Oregon's current 13-year undefeated string against Oregon State. In 1976, linebacker Darrell Mell was voted the team's outstanding player.
Anybody that plays football, especially at this level, that you gotta, if you're not crazy all the time, you're gonna have to do that, become the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndrome. But I think probably that made me better than maybe some of the other guys that I was real competitive. I just believe in competition, and I strive to try to win, not at all costs, but pretty close.
In 1977, Rich Brooks, who had spent 9 years as a player and coach at Oregon State, replaced Don Reed.
Of course, I had been gone. I'd coached at UCLA 2 different times with the Rams and the 49ers, so there was some time in between the 2 schools. But I'm in a profession where coaching is my job and my business, and I think that I was given an opportunity here at the University of Oregon that I wasn't given at Oregon State to be a head coach, and I really appreciate that opportunity, and I just want to make the people here glad they had me.
In his first year, the Ducks fell to 2-9, as big plays like this 61-yard strike from Jack Henderson to Ken Page were few and far between. All-Pro San Francisco 49ers center Fred Quillen remembers the Oregon fans during those lean years.
Lord knows they weren't spoiled. You know, we didn't give them much to be spoiled about. So they just liked us for what we were. We just tried hard, and they liked us when they saw a good game. My senior year was the 3rd year that we beat them in a row, and that was a record for us. That was the first time that Oregon has beat Oregon State for 3 consecutive times. That's the first time that happened for many, many years. And in fact, I don't believe they've beat them yet. So I think there was a tie in there. But those Oregon State games, the Civil War games, were definitely the highlight of the year for us.
The Oregon State victory my first year, the 28-16 win here in Autzen Stadium in '77, was we had to pull it all out of the hat. The fake field goal, the halfback pass, the fake punt, the whole deal. And it was, I think, a very satisfying win at that stage of my career.
Through 1987, Brooks holds the uncanny record of 17-0-2 as a player and coach on both sides of the Civil War rivalry. As the head coach at Oregon, he is 10-0 with 1 tie.
I'm really proud that the players that have played for me in their last game again in the Civil War game can always say they beat their arch rival.
In 1977, another school record was set. 1978 could be called the close but no cigar season, as the Ducks lost 6 games by a total of 19 points and 4 in a row in the last 3 minutes of the game. One of their 2 wins came against Washington State, as world-class sprinter Don Coleman turned on the Jets. The Ducks pulled off some trickery against Brigham Young as Jim Johnson found quarterback Tim Durando. Freshman Dwight Robertson came into his own against the Beavers as he scored 3 touchdowns as the Ducks dominated Oregon State 24-3. Brooks' second victory over the Beavers, unlike his first one, was no upset. Senior linebacker Willie Blasher got the game ball. Linebacker Bruce Beakley was the Hoffman Award winner in 1978, and Vince Williams led the Ducks in rushing with 853 yards. The football program made a quantum leap forward in 1979 as the Ducks posted their first winning record in 9 years, and Brooks was named Pac-10 and District 9 Coach of the Year. Undoubtedly, the biggest key to the Ducks' success was the emergence of Reggie Ogburn. Ogburn, an explosive running and passing threat, continually kept the opposition off balance with his quickness and dazzling speed. Ogburn ran for more yards in 1979 and in his career at Oregon than any other quarterback in Oregon history. The Ducks opened 1979 against Colorado before a national cable TV audience and tamed the Buffaloes 33-19. Neil Elshire and Terry Dion led an awesome pass rush that registered 9 sacks in that game. 2 weeks later, Oregon led Washington 17-0 with 9 minutes left in the game, as Osborne had hit Greg Hoganson and Robertson had scored on a sweep. But the Huskies came back and won in the last minute on Mark Lee's punt return. Oregon rebounded to win 5 of their last 7, and it started with Cal as Don Coleman blew past all would-be tacklers. Rock Richmond's electrifying punt return turned the tide for the Ducks to put them back on the winning track.
The right sideline to midfield to the Cal 45, to the 40, to the 35, cuts back against the grain. He's got a chance to go all the way to the 25, to the 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown Rock Richmond!
Chris Cosgrove's interception contributed to Oregon setting a school record the next week against Air Force, as the defense held the Falcons to minus yardage passing. The big plays continued against Washington State as Reggie Ogburn put the Ducks in command from the start. Symbolic of the reversal of Oregon's fortunes was this reverse against Stanford, as Dwight Robertson benefited from Steve Greatwood and Kurt Jackson's blocks. Against the Beavers, the reverse worked again, this time to Jackson. Oregon State had had enough of the Reggies by the end of the game, as Ogburn ran for a touchdown, passed to Reggie Young for another, and Young weaved his way through Oregon State for 139 yards. Ricky Ward shows why he was the leading receiver in 1979. All Pac-10 honors went to defensive tackle Vince Goldsmith in 1979 and 1980. He also won the Hoffman Award in both those years. The first Duck player to score a touchdown at Autzen Stadium was Denny Schuler in 1967 against Colorado. Schuler is now Oregon's defensive coordinator. This head coach was named the National Coach of the Week 2 times in 1 year. In addition, he is the only Oregon coach here 5 years or more with a winning record against the Huskies. In the 80s, the university has maintained its beauty and heritage while keeping up with a changing world.
Ducks have spent most of the 80s in the middle of the pack. Good competition, exciting players, and mixed success have whetted the appetite for coaches, players, and fans for a move to the top.
In 1980, the Ducks went 6-3-2, which is still their best record under Rich Brooks. 1979 and 1980 were the first times Oregon teams had back-to-back winning seasons since 1963 and 1964. 2 of Brooks' most satisfying wins came in 1980.
The game against Michigan State when we beat them here 35-9 in Autzen Stadium
we were out ready to take our Friday warm-up, and the Michigan State team came off and kind of went by our players as they were going out and started a little chant saying, "Duck soup, duck soup, duck soup." Well, I think that put a little bit of emotion into our players, and we went out and showed Michigan State that they were the main ingredient in that duck soup the next day.
Ducks avenged the 1979 nightmare against Washington by thumping the Huskies 34-10 in Seattle. And Steve Brown's second-half interception return was the knockout punch that put Washington away. The next week against USC, this play was ruled a touchdown, even though the receiver did not have possession inbounds. Despite an unfortunate fumble that would have given the Ducks 6 points, they came back to tie USC as the line showed its strength, clearing the way for Terrence Jones. Brian Hinkle helped preserve the tie with this great play.
On 4th and 1, the give to Marcus Allen. He stopped at the line of scrimmage. The Ducks take over. Bach, Haggerty, and Gibson stop Marcus. 42,000 going crazy. It's Oregon's football.
Another one of Oregon's impressive games was against UCLA, rated in the top 10, as both Washington and USC had been before facing the Ducks. The game went down to the wire, but the Oregon secondary held off 3 UCLA attempts near the goal line. Brian Hinkle had an outstanding game and was voted Pac-10 Defensive Player of the Week an amazing 4 times that season. The Ducks capped the season by blasting the Beavers again in Corvallis, thereby sweeping the 3 Northwest schools for the first time since 1954. Sure-handed Greg Moser, who made a habit of acrobatic catches, was the leading receiver in 1980 and 1981. Reggie Brown, the leading ball carrier in 80 and 81, shows why he was called the Truck during his playing days. Reggie Ogburn shared the Hoffman Award with Vince Goldsmith. Despite some great performances, it became obvious in 1981 just how much Ogburn, the spark that ignited the team, was missed. Punt returner Choo Choo Young was another talented player who provided the fans with lots of excitement. Here, Steve Brown returns a kickoff 93 yards for a touchdown. Brown's run ranks 3rd on Oregon's all-time list. In their win against Pacific, the fake field goal resulted in a touchdown from Greg Moser to Greg Hoganson. This John Elway pass didn't find its target as Dennis Clay out-wrestled the Stanford receiver for the ball. A win over Oregon State was about the only consolation for a team that was predicted to finish 2nd in the Rose Bowl race. Reggie Brown was the Hoffman Award winner in 1981 and led the team in rushing for the 2nd straight year.
The tape will continue in just a few seconds.